Welcome Andrea, Annette, Sarah and Joyce. From the representative, okay, I'm going to start again. Molly. Okay. Welcome Andrea, Annette, Sarah and Joyce from the Queensland Fire and Rescue. Thank you for all coming to the meeting today. As you all know, the purpose of today's meeting is to design and construct the foundation of a fire evacuation plan for new products. There are no minutes of the previous meeting as this is the first meet and everyone is in attendance, so there are no apologies. Andrea, could you please give us a quick rundown on why the evacuation plan is required and what responsibilities on our part is required?
Firstly, the reason why the fire evacuation plan is required to be updated to meet safety standards is because of the recent report that you can find in Appendices 1 stating of the incident when a fire broke out in the manufacturing department, then spread to the inbound supplies building, causing up to $1 million worth of damage. There were no fatalities, however, 3 employees were injured. When the Queensland Fire and Rescue team reviewed the buildings and the evacuation procedure, they discovered not only was there dangerous items not contained in an isolated environment, but would have prevented events like this from occurring, but employees did not know how to react in a situation of a fire. If you would now like to look at Appendices 2, the requirement for a standard fire evacuation plan consists of different procedures, exits and evacuation points for each building to undergo in the event of a fire. This can be shown through a fire evacuation map approved by Queensland Fire and Rescue Services. As well as a detailed map, there must be allocated members of staff to fulfill roles and responsibilities. The roles that are appointed to staff include emergency coordinator, building wardens, and floor and area wardens. The emergency coordinator role is to be responsible for overall coordination of actions in connection with emergency evacuation procedures. The role of emergency coordinator is usually undertaken by the security manager. He or she is responsible for ensuring that personnel responsible for emergency evacuation are aware of their responsibilities, checking that the alarm has been relayed to the fire service, ensuring that designated duties are correctly and promptly carried out, acting as a liaison officer with police, fire service and other emergency services, ensuring that all emergency service personnel are directed to the building involved in the emergency, liaison with the building warden for the buildings involved in a fire or emergency, and finally, advising staff when it is safe to re-enter the building. The building warden and deputies should be appointed for each building. If a building is occupied by only one department, the head of that department should make this appointment. Where more than one department occupies a building, the appointment should be made by the appropriate executive dean or executive deans of consultation. The building warden and deputies should be physically fit, mature and responsible members of staff with personalities that will give confidence in an emergency. Their normal work location should preferably be on or close to the ground floor, and their duties should not require frequent absences from the building. The building warden should be available at all times during normal working hours. The responsibility of the building warden during emergency situations will be in control of the occupants of the whole building until the arrival of the fire service. Before a fire, a building warden will assist in training of emergency personnel under their command after receiving training themselves. Designate an assembly area or areas for the building. Occupants of the building should be directed to assemble in this area when required to evacuate the building in an emergency. This will facilitate checking that all occupants are safe and enable speedy return to the building when an all clear is given. Ensuring that on each floor or in each area, a current list of floor and area wardens and telephone numbers is displayed, together with an emergency floor plan. The emergency floor plan should show all rooms, exits, and assembly area to be used in case of fire or emergency, fire alarms, extinguishers, fire hose reels, and special emergency equipment, and ensuring that all staff in the building are given instruction in relation to evacuation procedures. Means of escape from the building and locations of assembly areas. The location and operation of fire alarms and the location and operation of fire extinguishers or other equipment. Floor wardens and their deputies should be appointed for each floor of the building. In buildings where features of the building indicate the necessity, floors should be divided into areas for which an area warden should be appointed. The general selection criteria for floor and area wardens and their deputies are the same as for the building wardens and their deputies, and the appointments should be made by the head of department. The floor wardens and their deputies' responsibilities consist of, before fire or emergency floor, an area warden should familiarise. Before a fire, an emergency floor and area warden should familiarise themselves with the floor or area for which they have responsibility. Familiarise themselves with potential areas such as strong rooms, rooms leading off blind passages, doors leading to dead ends, toilets or changing rooms. Identify people who require special assistance during evacuation. Identify means of egress and alternative means of escape. Identify location of push-button alarm points and firefighting or emergency equipment. Ensure that staff are conversant with these emergency evacuation procedures and the correct use of firefighting and emergency equipment. Carry out monthly inspections of their area and remove hazards or advise the head of department or director of occupational health and safety, as appropriate, of the hazards. Ensure that firefighting and emergency equipment is in its correct position as shown on the displayed floor plans and ready for use. Ensure that pathways and exits are kept clear at all times. Ensure that notices required by these procedures are kept current and prominently displayed. Additional wardens should be appointed where required to assist the floor or area warden. This should be on the basis of at least 1 to every 40 people employed on the floor or in the area, and take account of the need to have at least one warden from each department or section on the floor. In the case of a fire or emergency, until the arrival of the fire services, the floor or area warden, under the direction of the building warden, will control all evacuation and firefighting, use of fire extinguishers on their building or in their area. The floor or area warden should check the source, type and severity of the emergency, order the evacuation of the floor if necessary, advise the building warden of the emergency on the floor and propose action to be taken. Ensure that all occupants of the floor are aware that evacuation of the floor is necessary, and direct the occupants to the nearest accessible exit or escape stairs, through which they should proceed to the designated assembly area. Ensure that evacuation from the floor is orderly, and by means of the stairs, not lifts. Ensure that necessary assistance is given to disabled and other persons in need of special care. Check fire doors to ensure that they are closed, and post a watch so that they are kept closed except during the escape of occupants, provided it's safe to do so. Make a thorough search of the whole floor or area to ensure that there are no persons remaining. Advise the building wardens when evacuation is completed. Assist the building wardens in checking that all building occupants have arrived at the assembly area. It should be emphasised that the primary role of wardens is not to combat fires and emergencies, but to ensure, as far as practicable, the safety of occupants and their orderly evacuation from emergencies. I have presented all of the information required to create a fire evacuation plan.
Thank you, Andrea. Now, with that in mind, would you, Annette, like to inform the heads of department and inform them of the roles and responsibilities of the appointing and requirements?
Yes, of course. I and my secretary are holding a meeting to inform the appointers and appointees.
Thank you, Annette. Now we have Joyce from Queensland Fire and Rescue Services to give a presentation on their ideas for the evacuation plan, available training courses for workplaces hosted by Queensland Fire and Rescue for yourselves and other staff members will undertake to be prepared in the case of a fire, and also safety requirements that are to be met to prevent the case of a fire.
Thank you, Molly. As you know, my name is Joyce from Queensland Fire and Rescue Services.
My job is to visit workplaces to assist in any way I can to make evacuation plans, help companies meet safety standards, and give information such as available training courses to keep yourselves and fellow colleagues fire smart. A fire evacuation plan is a written document detailing how a workplace and its occupants deal with or manage an emergency. An effective emergency plan consists of the preparedness within the workplace, such as training and fire protection equipment, response and recovery activities, including the roles, responsibilities, and agreements that Andrea listed previously. A list of emergency services contacts should be known to all staff members. The level of detail in the emergency plan will depend on the complexity of the activities at the workplace involved, how much and what types of hazardous materials are stored or used at the time. At Acme Products, the fire evacuation plan required will reach medium complexity since there are lots of hazardous materials moved and stored on a daily basis. Therefore, by high risks, the hazardous materials involved with Acme Products workplace is required extra precautions are put in place. These materials should be in an enclosed, isolated section from the rest of the building that is electronically controlled by machines. This way, staff will not be put at risk by working close with the hazardous materials, and in case of a fire, the material will not be exposed and not aggravated by the fire. I will organise a specialised electrical engineer experienced and recommended by the Queensland Fire and Rescue to come out and discuss more on what needs to be implemented. An emergency plan must provide for the following emergency procedures, including an effective response to an emergency, evacuation procedures, notifying emergency service organisations at the earliest opportunity, medical treatment and assistance, and effective communication between the person authorised to coordinate emergency response and all people at the workplace, testing of the emergency procedures, including the frequency of testing, and information, training and instruction to relevant workers in relation to implementing emergency procedures. Step 1. Evacuate staff and customers. Step 2. Notify emergency services. Step 3. Seek medical assistance. Also, it would be a good idea to notify local hospitals and fire stations of the hazardous material to prepare them for treating the fire patients in relation to these dangerous materials. Now if you'll look to Appendix C3, it will show you the standard evacuation map that the fire and rescue services have created and tailored for Acme Products. Page 2 shows the building. Fire evacuation procedures for shipping include all occupants using the stairwell situated on all 4 stories. Once exiting the stairwell on the first floor is an exit. Occupants will then be required to exit the building following the path stated on the evacuation map for that particular building and gather at the car park, which is the assembly point. In the case of a fire on the first floor, occupants will be required to use the stairwell and exit on the second floor, which leads to the shared courtyard. The occupants then should enter the manufacturing building, follow the signs to the nearest stairwell, make their way onto the first floor, exit the building, follow the path stated on the evacuation map for the particular building, and gather at the car park, which is the assembling point. Fire evacuation procedures for the manufacturing building include all occupants using the stairwells located on both 2 stories. The occupants will be required to exit at the first floor, follow the path stated on the evacuation map for the particular building, and gather at the car park, which is the assembling point. In the case of a fire on the first floor, occupants will be required to use stairwells and exit on the second floor, which leads to the shared courtyard. The occupants then should enter the shipping building, follow the signs to the nearest stairwell, make their way onto the first floor, exit the building, follow the path stated on the evacuation map for that particular building, and gather at the car park, which is the assembling point.
Fire evacuation procedures for the inbound supplies building include all occupants using the stairwell situated on all 3 stories. Once exiting the stairwell on the first floor is an exit. Occupants will then be required to exit the building, follow the path stated on the evacuation map for that particular building, and gather at the car park, which is the designated assembling point. In the case of a fire on the first floor at the front of the building, occupants will be required to use the second stairwell closer to the loading dock at the back of the building. The occupants should then exit out of the loading dock, follow the path stated on the evacuation map for that particular building, and gather at the car park, which is the assembling point. Fire evacuation procedures for the sales and marketing building include all occupants using the exit closest to them by looking at the exit signs. The occupants should then exit the building and follow the path as stated on this map and gather at the car park, which is the designated assembling point. Fire evacuation procedures for the tech support building include all occupants using the exit closest to them by looking at the exit signs. Then on exiting onto the shared courtyard, enter the sales and marketing building. Follow the signs showing the exits onto Main Street and follow the path as stated on this map and gather at the car park, which is the designated assembling point. In the case of a fire in the sales and marketing building, occupants will then be required on exiting onto the shared courtyard to enter the shipping building. Follow the signs to the nearest stairwells and exits. Follow the path stated on the evacuation map for that particular building and gather at the car park, which is the assembly point. Now on to workplace training. Queensland Fire and Rescue offers comprehensive fire safety training for workplaces in businesses and industries. Whatever the size of your organisation, QFRS can provide the nationally accredited specialist training program for your organisation, preparing your premises and personnel for unexpected emergencies, and providing you and your workplace with the skills and knowledge to manage emergency situations efficiently. QFRS is a registered training organisation. Training is delivered by fully qualified professional fire officers with nationally accredited training qualifications. Training programs can be conducted at your premises with minimal disruption to your business or at one of the QFRS specialised training facilities. It is highly recommended that your workplace undergo fire safety training to prepare yourself in the case of a fire. Sorry, Joyce, we have gone over time. And now, will you be able to inform local emergency services and provide them with an evacuation map, as well as book a time for training with Queensland Fire and Rescue for all staff at Acme Products to undergo?
I'll have my secretary book a fire safety training appointment with Queensland Fire and Rescue and notify ACME's product staff.
Thank you everyone, especially Joyce. We have now come to an end of the meeting, successfully fulfilling today's goal of laying the foundation of a fire evacuation plan and procedure. Thank you.